Okay, I'm Emina Visnic. At the moment, I'm head of program in Rijeka 2020, where I used to be for a few years also a CEO.
Thank you so much, Emina, for agreeing to talk with us. We, as you'll know, Galway also capital of culture. So, you know, the sense in which there are two capitals of culture in the same year. We, of course, had hoped to have some celebration of that in Galway and that kind of recognition of both spaces. Patrick and I partnered with the University Network of European Capitals of Culture in the hope to have a conference. We were, through a Creative Europe bid, we were hoping to bring over as well artists, 81 artists from 41 European countries to come and do workshops with us in Galway and to really include our students and researchers in a process of thinking about Europe. But of course, nothing could happen this year. So instead, we are putting together an online forum, really, for some conversation, for articles in which people can reflect on previous capitals of culture, future capitals of culture. And we really wanted to talk to you today because, you know, of the difficulty and the you know, just about the year that's been in it around the global pandemic and how that's impacted on Rijeka. So we were hoping that maybe you know that you would be able to tell us something about you know, about Rijeka this year.
Yeah, of course. It has been, as I said, a super challenging year. To produce a program of such an extent as European Capital of Culture is a challenge in itself. And of course, with the virus, with Corona, it came for some events, they just became impossible, such as big gatherings, concerts, and this kind of large events. On the other hand, we've been lucky, you know, dancing on the edge of luck with our opening ceremony on the 1st of February. I know that Galway had a problem with the weather, and in the end, nothing couldn't happen outside. We were at the edge of it. There was really heavy rain going on here, but we made it. And without it, I can't even imagine how we would feel, because this was really important moment for the year. We managed to get the atmosphere of the city that, you know, it seems that everybody were out there, no matter rain, people were happy. We had a 24 hours program from the morning that Saturday till the morning next Sunday, of course, with the central ceremony in our harbor. And I'm sure that will be for all of us who have worked for the European Capital of Culture, but also for the citizens of Rijeka and surrounding region, a moment we will remember. Even then, although it was possible to travel, people already started to kind of stop their traveling. And a month or so afterwards, you know, there was a lockdown basically happening, total lockdown, schools were closed, all the events, culture, artistic events couldn't be happening, and so on. For us, it was, of course, huge shock, like for everybody else, because nobody expected anything like that. You know, when you do a project, you think about, you know, what are the risks, what can happen, where things could go wrong. Then you think about the strategies which you will use, but nobody in their craziest minds could think of a situation where it would be virtually impossible to perform theater, to organize an exhibition, to work with the communities, to have workshops for children, to have concerts, and so on. So at first it was really huge shock. In the same time, the crisis hit quite quickly also at an economic level, in the sense that all the businesses, all the shops were closed, and that there was a national government, local government investing for people's salaries, etc., etc. We, Rijeka 2020, as a public company, we didn't have any right to use any of these support measures. And the city and the state were cutting their budgets. It was all announced that there will be cuts. In the end, we were about 70 people in our company, plus of course a lot of partners. We needed to lay off about 60 people and then stayed for a period of few months at a level of 10 people, just, you know, key people. And then we got back another 10. We were around 20 to try to finish the year. The budgets that were cut more or less 40% for total in a year. But taking in mind that we had this opening, which was the biggest budget, production budget of all, and we had some bigger expenses, such as we had a neat company festival, etc., etc. It actually cut it for the second part of year. We would say we had definitely less than half a budget. No, sorry, that was one thing. The other thing was that it was quite a challenge of communication, and I can say frankly and openly that we didn't face that challenge as you know, as we could. The biggest problem for us was that we didn't know what to communicate exactly, in the sense of seeing some future. We couldn't get for quite a long, and in that period, you know, 1 month is a long period, clear response from our finances, the city, the region, the ministry. So we were understanding, yes, there will be budget cut, but how much it's going to be. So of course, if you plan any activities, programs, or anything, you need to have at least that framework. Excuse me. So, you know, it was a hectic period. It took, I personally didn't feel at all anxiety about being home and, you know, being isolated, because I was every day in the office, and it was a really hectic period. After that, you know, things kind of settled down a little bit in May, where all the measures that government was implementing for the virus were have been more relaxed. So we had a summer season quite open. Almost everything was possible to produce, of course, with the limitation of the seats in theaters, and it's of course the biggest challenge is for the performing arts in general, so theater, music, dance, opera, and so on. But as we had a quite long period of nice weather from June till even part of November, we could produce a lot of events open air. So this was the basic strategy, to go open air. The other very important thing for us was that we put focus on exhibitions. So these are, you know, because we had a focus on exhibitions anyhow in our programming structure, because when we started to think about program, we were thinking not only about our local audiences, but we expected a lot of European audiences and from the other countries of the world. And I was always thinking that there must be at least 2 things in the city that people could see, even if there's nothing live, but there should be exhibition. So we prepared a lot of exhibition, artistic, more contemporary art, but also Klimt and this kind of events, but also historical or thematic exhibitions. So we could stay with those. Unfortunately, we had to cancel Klimt because it was impossible, you know, to get to all the works you need. And without international audiences, without tourists, you know, it doesn't have any sense of doing it budget-wise. But we managed to organize several exhibitions, smaller concerts, a lot of smaller events, as I said, outside India. We managed to use an old warehouse in the center of the city as our new major space, which gave us also a lot of space regarding, you know, these anti-coronavirus measures and how you do the whatever you need to do to make it as a healthier environment for people. So in that sense, we can be rather happy. We managed also to do a lot of work with we had quite many projects with that engage local communities in the city of Rijeka, but also all around. Of course, they had bigger ambitions at the beginning, but they managed to do programs on a smaller scales. But for us, it was important that there's energy, that the links between people that have been built through the project, that they stayed, and that we also realize it is important that these people who have been investing, they're not professionals, who have been investing their free time, all the love they have in these projects, to have some kind of ta-na-na-na moment, some kind of opening, some kind of recognition, press, etc. So it proved right. And also, to turn back to our strategies, we also choose a strategy to work more with the local, meaning artists from here rather than international, because it was almost impossible to travel. As you said at the beginning, traveling became such an obstacle, and in one point it was really literally impossible, that we decided to focus more on local artists, but keeping also the European dimension where we could. For instance, in our Lungomare Art project, which is a project of building up contemporary artistic installations in different places around the region, we could build it even without the presence of artists, which was a little bit strange, and it was strange to do the openings of these events. We were reading letters, from the artists and this kind of stuff. But we somehow managed to do a lot, even if the year was such a big trouble, I would say. Of course, I'm also really happy that we managed to put the rest of the resources mostly into the program and people around it. On the other hand, of course, marketing and such activities suffered, but it was an easy decision to make because the most of the budget of marketing, the most expensive things have been targeting audiences that are not living here in Rijeka, and if they cannot come, it doesn't make any sense to spend all that money. At this moment, we're approaching the end of the year. We still can be really happy that we can have exhibitions still open, although the restriction for COVID are, we are approaching another lockdown, maybe not the total one, but the bars are closed, the restaurants are closed, opera cannot be happening, choirs are forbidden because, of course, of a lot of spitting. But we still have exhibitions open, one exhibition for children, one exhibition about the Rijeka history in similar cities. There are still community events happening, and some other activities. But as I said, we tried really to push. This was the main strategy, to push as much as we can in this period between June and October.
Will you go into next year, or will there be any activities for 2021?
Yes, there will be an extension into next year. As you probably know, with this European Parliament decision till the end of April. I myself am quite critical, or I have a critical opinion about it, because I think it's just a PR thing. What does it mean, an extension, if there are no resources to help? And the procedure, which I think is still not over. I mean, our decisions have been made in April, May latest this year. Decisions that are coming at the end of the year are really just PR, but we will be doing not that much. Hopefully, we will manage to organize Klimt exhibition, which is done by our city museum. We will try to do some kind of closing celebration, of course, a smaller event, continue with a few exhibitions with its space. I mentioned this children exhibition, the Balthazar City will be happening also throughout January. There should be another exhibition opening, so there will be few events, but I don't think we will manage to get the atmosphere in the city, being there for such a long period. Of course, at the beginning, you know, I was my personally lobbying and advocating the extension because it only makes sense. I didn't know why the extensions were made until you know, just before the main season. We could all hopefully, you know, hoping for summer to get tourists, to get visitors, to have open air events and so on. So it's a kind of, yeah, it's a decision, but it doesn't mean a lot, if I can put it simply.
Well, especially when the prohibition of live events in large numbers is likely to continue into the summer of 2021 anyway. So,
yeah.
So next year's Capitals of Culture, I'm sure, having to
maybe summer will be better, you know, because of course whole Europe lives of tourism in a large extent, and Croatian GDP, you know, the part which tourism makes in Croatian GDP, it's really huge. I won't go now with numbers because I can't remember the exact one, but it's quite a big portion. And I'm sure, you know, if anytime next year, then summer would be a period that maybe we could, to, you know, if the vaccine project will hold on, that there is a possibility to do something different, or what seems abnormal now and used to be very normal just a year or so ago.
It's a very I mean, it's wonderful to hear you describe that whole year. It sounds, you know, incredibly busy, and as you said, the joy of the fact that you had your opening, you know, and it was so prolific. That in itself was a kind of a major thing to be able to have before that first wave of lockdowns. But I suppose I was wondering about you know, reading yesterday about how Lisbon is now, you know, taking over housing or taking over kind of tourist or Airbnb spaces from landlords in order to create further housing. That this has been a moment where some cities are really rethinking what they are and what they do and how they do things. In the universities, we're rethinking, you know, education, of how we deliver, and you know, the pros and cons of democratic access to courses and programs. And the capital of culture is so much about what a city is, and you know, the role of arts and culture in the city, but then also in that broader remit that comes with that designation of having you know, a more pan-European context for the national. And this, you know, that you know, what we're seeing in the lockdowns is these national borders, closing borders, opening borders, you know, who can be in this space and who can't be in this space. And one of your major themes was around anti-fascism. It was around, you know, that incredible kind of immigrant communities to Rijeka. And so in this very challenging and very difficult year, has it also been an opportunity to rethink what cities are in terms of tourism or footfall, or who cities are for and how they're used?
Yeah, unfortunately, I have to say that maybe for all of us that been in implementation of the project, and I guess city administration, is maybe a little bit too early. The other thing is, it's a particular political situation now here in Rijeka. You know, the mayor who has been here, you know, winning the election for 20 years, is about to leave. So this will be a big change for the, and it's mayor has a quite important role symbolically, but also in a decision making. That's one thing, and the other thing is, I will say it frankly, and this is kind of my personal disappointment, that unfortunately, except maybe from the Rijeka University, I couldn't find people, you know, in a sense, real partners who are actually thinking about the future. It's about the attitude. It's more about day-to-day surviving rather than thinking and having visions, which has in the background of Rijeka 2020, no matter coronavirus, has been problem from the beginning. You know, it's a kind of twofold situation. As we said, the European capitals of cultures are there to contribute to some kind of vision of development of a city, right? And then when this vision is not clear, I mean, there are documents, there are strategies and so on, but it's not clear. And Rijeka, it's quite complex cities, and I know there are similar cities around Europe. It has been a very important harbor for Austro-Hungarian Empire. This is how it actually became a city as it is. Then for a quite a big country of former Yugoslavia. And now since, Croatia is an independent country for the last 30 years, it's a bit lost, it's still a harbor, but wants to be a tourist city a little bit more, because all around us there's super developed touristic region, with the top numbers, a lot of tourists, etc. Rijeka has always been kind of transit city. So in that sense, it was hard to get to have this kind of conversation, and usually what I would get like, yeah, but this is not clear. So it's for you, European capital of culture, and the opportunity, to imagine the future. And I never wanted to have this burden and responsibility on our backs, because it would be fake, if you don't have real tools. And we are, of course, city-owned organization, so we cannot be an advocacy or activist organization. It's a kind of, we were actually founded as an agency to implement a project, not to set up agenda on the future of the city. Of course, there's some specific projects we open up, some questions. We showed how it is possible, I don't know, to engage volunteers as citizens, which is really not a common thing to do in Croatia. Anyhow, how to engage different local communities all around. But I don't see even now that either city or the region or anyone would recognize this and translate it into strategies, policies, future programs. I mean, we've been talking about it. We're gonna, do the legacy proposals, but unfortunately, I don't see really this kind of thinking. The only change I could see, but this is something that is happening by itself rather than by the strategy and a vision, is this focus of tourism sector, or it's more like a buzzword, on digital nomads. Because what is happening now here around us on these different islands, or maybe now it will stop because it is getting colder, that a season extended because people from Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, many other countries just came here and rented a house for a month or two, because they work remotely and it's nicer, to be here, and it's rather cheap. Or even camps were full of people as it was. So this is something that's kind of happened by chance rather than it's a result of a thought through strategy.
Could you maybe tell us a bit about, because we're talking about legacy, about the arts community in Rijeka before coronavirus, and then perhaps a little bit about how they've been faring during the year as a result of the crisis?
Well, in Rijeka, as in general in Croatia, arts or cultural sector, let's call it like that, and not the community, they're mostly organized through big public institutions. No? There is a huge theater with 4 ensembles, etc., museums, and so on. So the effect of the crisis on their everyday life wasn't that bad. I mean, they kept their salaries. Those are those who are employed. On the other hand, the independent artists, which are most visual artists, a lot of musicians, especially musicians, the visual artists are in a bad existential situation, as they always have been, and even this few projects they had, a lot of them were canceled. But on the other hand, a lot of what they do doesn't depend on the participation of audience immediately, no? But then the musician, the performing artists, even those who have been earning a lot of money that are, not maybe in arts, but rather in entertainment sector, they just couldn't perform their concert as all over the world. And we know that musicians, if they're not authors, that this is their only the only earning they could get. This situation it's more, I think it's too early to talk about real effects. We all know, that people are insecure, but still there have been this injections, of money coming from the ministry here, there. So people would survive these several months. But I think if we would be discussing this a year from now, when we will see actually the real consequences, that I could give you more information or even the perspective where is this heading, because it's really hard now to predict, because we all know it's also about time, it's about budgets. As we know, all over Europe, most of the budgets are whatever the governments have, that they are investing back to the business sector, the entrepreneurs, etc. So to keep the economy alive. So it's hard to say now, but for sure nobody did profit from it. And of course, artists tried to do something online. This was and one point, especially at the beginning, this craziness or his kind of hysterical approach that everything could be done now online, and digital is our next solution. But nobody thought, that there is a special form called digital art. And if you do theater show for a screen, you do other thing, film or whatever, TV show or internet show, it's a different thing than the theater, and we all know why, but it was such a big pressure to do it, and there was such an overproduction of digital content of, I don't know, lousy quality more or less, and not really, and competing with such a huge big world, I don't know, Guggenheim Museum or this kind of institution. It doesn't make much sense, because everybody thought, okay, digital is just another tool. If we can do it in academia and our universities, we can teach over the laptop and our screens, and we can do everything. Even teaching is not, as you probably all know better than I do. It's a rather different thing. Not to mention the artistic process and communication with the audiences, and often that they're often participants and so on.
Yeah, I think people will tolerate it in an emergency, but I don't think it's a long-term.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, because the partnership that we have is with the University Network of Capitals of Culture. I'm from Liverpool and was very inspired to kind of subsequently, after the event of 2008 in Liverpool, to research and to realize how the universities had partnered with, I can't remember what it's called, but the cultural organization for Liverpool. That the kind of the executives, across the kind of major cultural institutions had come together, and they'd really organized around it. They'd founded an organization for the smaller cultural organizations in the city. There was a sense in which the universities were really engaged with the capital of culture in a very integral way to create opportunities for their students who were doing practice-based arts based education programs, but also opportunities for volunteering, maybe thinking about how the capital of culture can engage in programs on site at the university, and of course in the monitoring and evaluation. That was a very big one in Liverpool. Similarly, in Galway, we tried to establish links of how the university can engage and how the students can really benefit from that network and that engagement in a bigger European project. Was that the case for you? Did you have engagement with the universities? I know that, Patrick, you've been involved in a project with with the university in Rijeka as well around theatre, but I just wondered, was it a part of the bid process for you of partnering, and has the universities been a kind of a major part for you?
Yeah, of course. University of Rijeka was really a major partner from the beginning. Even so that the rector of the university was part of our steering committee representing the city. So even in that level of the structure, but also in a level of program and activities. As you mentioned, we did a lot concerning capacity building and education, also for students, but also we organized quite extensive 2 years long program of seminar called Classroom, that is dedicated to culture management, arts production, and this kind of practical skills, all in collaboration with the university. The campus of our university was one of 27 neighborhoods. This is our community project that I mentioned before, that works with the different communities in Rijeka, but also in surrounding regions, and connects each of this community with one community somewhere in Europe of one of 27 European countries, therefore 27 neighborhoods. So the campus was one of the neighborhoods. So we thought that this is really important because, you know, how campuses could be kind of satellites of the city rather than being part of the city. And this was also strategy, and still is, of the university, that the university wants to go further to the community, not to isolate itself, but rather to connect with the communities, and they're doing it in different other levels. So they did organize a lot of activities there. Of course, we had students working, be it in our company or other institutions and our and partners as volunteers, and or even, you know, employed just for some short jobs. You know, we still have students working at our, I don't know, desk offices and this kind of jobs. We also had several opportunities for students from drama, but also visual arts students to have their projects, smaller projects done. But also, I would say one of very important institutional legacy from my aspect comes with the university, because our program, as it has 7 major program streams, program lines. One of this was called, or still is called, Sweet and Salt, which was done by the university, for which actually the process of preparation and implementation of ECOC ended up with the establishment of the new university center, and also I think it's postdoc study or doctoral, I'm not sure, about architecture and urbanism. So it's, you know, direct result in cooperation of the university and us and the city, and this will sustain as a center after the everything will be done. So these are just few examples, and I'm sure I forgot I forgot a few different, people from different faculties from the university, engineering, of course, arts academy, faculty of humanities. They've all been involved in a different level. So university as a center itself, but also specific units of the university have been engaged either with us or with other partners, you know, the theater, the museum, and so on. And I think it was a really important ingredient of Rijeka 2020 program, but also as something maybe not that tangible legacy you leave, because you leave it with people who have been involved, and of course to institutions, into the institutional memory, to stay that experience that you don't work in your own, only just your safe environment, your ivory tower, but rather risk a little bit to get out of your safe zone, but to get to really get a lot of it. And I think people are really positive of this different types of experiences we've had.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely idea of the neighborhood, I think.
Yeah, I think it's quite nice if you think about the campus as a neighborhood, and you think it a little bit different, right? Yeah.
I think as well, it addresses the possibilities of legacy, even with the capitals of culture not having gone ahead in the way that we wanted them to. Where when we talked about it in Galway, we often spoke about 2020 not as a kind of a goal or an end point, but as a springboard, where we would spend several years building networks, building capacity, forming partnerships, and then 2020 happens. But after 2020, you have all of the legacies of those networks and relationships and the expertise continuing to develop. And so in a way, even though we didn't get to do what we wanted to in 2020, let's hope anyway that all of that work will pay off in the future, and that those networks will continue to be active, that the expertise will continue to be used. And I mean, do you think, I know it's very hard to predict when you're in the middle of it, but what do you think the impact on the future of the cultural sector in Rijeka is likely to be as a result of the year that you've had?
Yeah, it's very hard to say for now, and whatever I will say about it should be taken really in big brackets. But I'm not really optimistic. I'm not optimistic, not because it didn't happen. I think that the processes, the connections, the network, as you said, learning, the knowledge that have been gained, the experience is amazing. And we are talking about hundreds of people for sure, if not even more. And if you count all the volunteers, etc., you come to thousands. You know, But I don't see, as I mentioned before, I think it's key problem of Rijeka 2020 ECOC, but of many other ECOCs, is that there is a concrete vision and concrete plan of the city administration or whoever, but usually it's city administration, who now know, okay, we now had in Rijeka 2020, I don't know, 20 producers, I'm just saying, like, who really, gain their knowledge, craft their skills. We want to keep them in the city, and we want to involve them in the future development of the theaters, museums, etc. This doesn't exist. So I'm unfortunately, this didn't happen. Only this center, which I mentioned, the Delta Lab of Sweet and Salt, that happened at the university, is what we could call an institutional change. Everything else will be as it used to be. Nothing really happened at a structural level with the theater or with the existing museums. Of course, there will be new buildings. There will be, in Rijeka, there's been a lot invested really in a new infrastructure that will stay as a tangible long-term legacy. But nothing into thinking about how we can manage these places differently from the economic point of view, from the community and social point of view. So this is something that should be happening in parallel, with the production of the year 2020. I think every city should have a department or at least a group of people that is dedicated to this. And unfortunately, it's not. Everything is happening. The thinking is super short term. And what I'm afraid that a lot of young people that have been involved in this project, that have gone through these seminars we have organized, and that, more importantly, had an experience, unique experience in producing different events, exhibitions, and so on, will in the end, I'm not sure if they will even stay in the city, if there will be opportunities for them to stay, or they will have to move out of the city. I can only hope that the how to call it, that the different events that will affect each other by chance will produce some opportunity, but I'm quite skeptical of seeing that, because I don't see anybody is really planning anything or trying to organize anything structurally, institutionally. So this intangible legacy, especially the human power, if you like, its legacy, to sustain in the city and to help city in years to come.
Yeah, like planning 2020 should also be about planning for 2045 or 2050.
Absolutely.
And so on. Yeah.
Because if you are planning to invest such huge amount of money, because this is for creation, budgets, this type of budget, we were about 26 before crisis, so let's say around 20 million euros in for this is huge for culture here. If you this is really huge, and that you have it as a project money. Of course, you pay people also for salary, but it's not fixed. First you pay. Our theater has huge budget, but it's small for salaries and the building, and super small for programs and production. Not to have this and not to think about Rijeka 2030 at least doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah,
I mean, economically, of course, for whatever Rijeka invested, there was at least double that came from the Ministry of National level, from international sources, especially EU funds, etc. So yeah, it makes sense, even that. But if you are investing, I think I'm not talking about money before all, but the hope. People had a lot of hope from the project. People, I mean, regular citizens. There was a lot of hope that Rijeka 2020 European Capital of Culture bring about change. It will be a turning point for Rijeka and its future, and so on. And when the COVID crisis, struck, then kind of everything, for a moment, things have been quite pessimistic. That the truth kind of came out, all the PR, all the nice stories disappeared, and this truth was not that bright. I don't know, maybe, as I said at the beginning, maybe I'm super pessimistic because I'm super frustrated by the whole process. And I resigned from the CEO position, etc. So for me personally, it was very frustrating. But I think on the other hand, that now it's several months behind us, that I could have a kind of rather more objective view on things, and I talk to these people. I know them. That we are now friends. We've been together through a lot through this process, and I can't find very optimistic, much younger person than I. For me, it's okay. I will come back to I will just go back to Zagreb, where I came from, but I feel it's a shame. It's a lost opportunity if something won't change, and it would be happening, just by chance.
I suppose what's incredible about COVID is how it has put the emphasis really very literally on the idea of the health of the health of our, of our healthcare systems, of our ability to operate collectively as a very caring community. And so in that emphasis, and that Galway and Rijeka are so unusual this year because they've had that heightened awareness of a moment, of these moments of reflecting into what makes them a capital of culture, and all of those dreams and plans, some of which will, kind of be affected and go through, but others that will just remain something of the imagination.
Right.
And so hopefully just that emphasis, that global emphasis on healthcare and on the importance of our environments and our cities as really caring spaces, will be something that will come out of that. Patrick, did you have any other questions, or Elena, is there a question that we haven't asked you that you wanted us to ask?
Not really. I'm thinking. No, basically, I think we covered all the major things. I didn't expect that we would be discussing some specific programs or exhibition, but exactly more about phenomenon and general general conclusions. So. Or general view about the situation. No, I couldn't remember anything that we missed. Yeah, could not remember.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered a huge amount in a relatively short period of time. And I think, I know it's hard when we're all in the middle of it, but I do think that when people look back at both Galway and Rijeka, we will see, yes, there are some factors that are very specific to the year that we've had that no one had any control over. But we do also see that many of the themes and strands that are common to all capitals of culture were evident for both of us. So talking about those issues of legacy and the long-term planning, for example. And I guess, the tension sometimes between what the citizens get excited about and what the people in positions of authority want to see happen as well. We've seen that happen in Galway too. So I think that's been quite interesting as well, how despite COVID, some of those things have continued to happen anyway.
True. But tell me, how was I couldn't, because we were, of course, in our own house, I couldn't follow up what is going on with Galway. So if you can just, for my curiosity, give me just your frank, idea of what, because I know there was a lot of problems and people, nobody almost stayed in the office and etc. But in the end, I don't know how this finished, or were there any events or.
There have been events, and yeah, I think similarly to what you described, there were also many job losses. So many people who were expecting to have one of their busiest years ever suddenly found themselves out of work at very short notice. So obviously that's very traumatic and upsetting for those people. And when we think about all of the investment in terms of those people's skills and expertise and all the rest of it, to have that gone, I think, is a huge loss to our communities, but also to the individuals themselves. But nevertheless, I think that they have staged some really excellent events. So the Galway International Arts Festival staged a public artwork that was called the Mirror Pavilion, which was an enormous box near the harbour in Galway that had a kind of digital display, but was also reflecting the city back to itself. So it was very evocative and very beautiful and very kind of curious. People just found themselves staring at it for hours upon end. And Druid Theatre did some open air productions of plays by Lady Gregory, who's a Galway-based playwright, very neglected. And actually, I think in some ways they responded to the challenges caused by COVID by staging a work that we probably wouldn't have otherwise seen. That was actually brilliant. So I think they've refocused on some of the local things, and that's been very positive in terms of, first of all, just maintaining work for locally based artists, and also in showing that the quality of the work that Galway won the Capital of Culture designation for in the first place is really high. But I do think that for us, as for yourselves, the challenge is in making sure that we use this year, we use the experiences and the knowledge and the skills to really change the way art is made here in 2030, 2040, and so on. And I think that that's something that's down to people in universities, but it's also down to the authorities to support that as well.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that the artist studios and the need for spaces and actually being able to afford to live in cities and work in cities as artists, as creative practitioners, as cultural workers is really integral to that future.
True.
But thank you so much, Emina, for agreeing to have this conversation with us. It felt really important to us to have your voice and to have that reflection. And you've so generously given us a very clear idea of what has happened over the year for you. And it sounds like you've managed to do a huge amount, even under those very distressing and very difficult times. And thank you as well for that description of how the university was a fundamental kind of foundation to the developing that conversation, but also in thinking about how to deliver some of those projects. That for us is very important because it's as a university, in a capital of culture, we've been really trying to think into that very actively over the past couple of years. So it's wonderful to have that other example and those dimensions that you've brought to that conversation for us. So thank you very much.